Most people think Stoicism is about suppressing emotions so they can become calm and unbothered. That is exactly why they keep exploding at the same people, sabotaging the same goals, and repeating the same mistakes. They don't have a discipline problem, they have a blind spot. Marcus Aurelius warned himself to watch the movements of his own mind because an unchecked mind can quietly become its own enemy. The Stoic goal was never to bury your dark side, it was to expose it before it starts running your life. Think about the last time you said, "I don't know why I did that." Maybe you promised yourself you wouldn't send that angry message, then you did. You swore you would stay focused, then you wasted another evening scrolling. You decided to trust someone new, then fear made you pull away before they could hurt you. The action changed, but the pattern stays the same. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people are not making conscious decisions, they are obeying emotional habits they have never questioned. They believe they are choosing, in reality, they are reacting. That is where everything begins to fall apart. You can read every self-improvement book, listen to every motivational speech, set bigger goals, build better routines, but if there is a hidden part of your mind quietly pulling the strings, you will eventually destroy what your conscious mind is trying to build. This is why success often feels temporary. You make progress for a few weeks, then somehow end up back where you started. You blame your motivation, you blame your circumstances, you blame other people. Rarely do you stop and ask the question that changes everything. Who inside me wanted this outcome? Marcus Aurelius spent years asking himself questions like that. As emperor, he could have blamed difficult people, corrupt officials, endless wars, or bad luck. Instead, he kept bringing the investigation back to himself. Again and again, he reminded himself that the greatest danger was not outside him, it was the judgments, impulses, and unchecked reactions within his own mind. That idea feels almost backwards today. Modern culture teaches you to protect your ego. Stoicism teaches you to investigate it. There is a huge difference. Your ego always has an excuse. It tells you that your anger is justified, your jealousy is proof that life is unfair, your procrastination is because you're waiting for the perfect moment, your resentment exists because someone else forced it on you. Your mind is an expert defense lawyer. It can justify almost anything. That is why people can spend years trapped inside the same emotional cycle without realizing they are the ones keeping it alive. The hardest enemy to defeat is the one pretending to protect you. Every emotional reaction leaves a trail. Anger points somewhere. Jealousy points somewhere. Shame points somewhere. Fear points somewhere. None of these emotions appear out of nowhere. They grow from beliefs that have been living inside you for years, often without your permission and almost always without your awareness. Most people never follow the trail. They react, then they regret it, then they repeat it, and with every repetition, the pattern grows stronger. This is the part most people never hear about Stoicism. The ancient Stoics did not become emotionally strong by pretending difficult feelings didn't exist. They became stronger because they refused to let those feelings stay unexamined. Before they tried to control the world around them, they learned to question the world inside them. That changes everything, because once you can see the hidden force behind your reactions, it begins to lose its power. The emotion may still appear, but it no longer controls your next move. Yet this raises a much bigger question. If these hidden impulses have been shaping your choices for years, where did they come from in the first place? And more importantly, how do you uncover them without becoming trapped by them? The answer is not what most people expect, and it begins with a mistake almost everyone makes the moment an uncomfortable emotion appears. The mistake almost everyone makes is believing the emotion itself is the problem. They think, if I could just stop feeling angry, jealous, anxious, or resentful, my life would finally become peaceful. So they fight the emotion. They distract themselves, they stay busy, they force a smile. They repeat positive affirmations they don't really believe. For a while, it looks like it works. Then one difficult conversation, one rejection, one betrayal, or one unexpected setback tears the mask away, and the same emotion returns with even greater force. The Stoics took a completely different approach. They understood that emotions do not appear without a cause. Epictetus taught that people are disturbed not by events themselves, but by the judgments they make about those events. That single idea changes the entire battle. If your judgment creates your emotional reaction, then trying to silence the emotion without examining the judgment is like mopping the floor while ignoring the leaking pipe overhead. The problem keeps returning because its source was never touched. Think about someone who becomes furious every time they are criticized. Most people would say they have an anger problem, but anger is only the surface. Underneath it, it may be a hidden belief that says, if someone criticizes me, I lose my worth. Another person might hear the exact same criticism, accept what is useful, ignore what is false, and move on with their day. The event is identical. The hidden belief is not. This is why two people can experience the same situation and walk away with completely different emotions. One loses a job and sees it as proof they are a failure. Another loses the same job and sees it as a difficult chapter that can be overcome. One enters a relationship expecting abandonment and finds reasons to distrust every act of kindness. Another enters with confidence and builds trust patiently over time. Life presents the same challenge. The unseen story inside the mind determines the response. But most people never question that story because it has been playing for so long that it feels like reality. They mistake a deeply rooted belief for an unquestionable fact. That is where self-sabotage begins. You are no longer responding to the present moment, you are reacting to an old conclusion your mind reached years ago. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to separate what was happening from the opinion he was adding to it. He understood that the mind has a habit of rushing ahead, assigning meaning before the facts are even clear. A delayed reply becomes rejection. A disagreement becomes disrespect. One mistake becomes proof that nothing will ever change. The mind fills the gaps with stories, then reacts as if those stories were true. That habit is dangerous because the stories feel convincing. They sound like your own voice. They arrive instantly. They defend themselves. The longer they go unchallenged, the more they shape your identity. Eventually, you stop saying, "I feel insecure." You start saying, "This is just who I am." A temporary emotional pattern slowly becomes a permanent identity. This is exactly how your hidden impulses stay hidden. They don't announce themselves as fear, pride, or insecurity. They disguise themselves as common sense. They tell you not to apologize because you'll look weak. They tell you not to try because you'll probably fail. They tell you to attack first because everyone is against you. Every excuse feels reasonable until you stop long enough to examine where it came from. Yet this is where everything changes. The moment you stop asking, "How do I get rid of this feeling?" and start asking, "What belief gave this feeling its power?" you begin to reclaim control. You stop treating emotions like enemies to be defeated and start treating them like messengers carrying information about parts of yourself you have ignored for far too long. That realization is uncomfortable because it destroys one of the ego's favorite illusions. If your reactions are being shaped by hidden beliefs, then the people you blame may not be the biggest obstacle in your life. The greatest obstacle may be the part of you that refuses to question itself. And that is the confrontation most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Now comes the part that most people don't want to hear. If you constantly find yourself in the same arguments, the same disappointments, and the same emotional crashes, the common factor is not your family, your boss, your partner, or your circumstances. The common factor is you. That does not mean everything is your fault. It means your response to life has become predictable, and anything predictable can eventually control you. This is where the ego fights back. The ego does not want understanding, it wants protection. It wants to stay innocent. It wants every problem to have a face outside itself. That is why it loves blame. Blame gives temporary relief because it removes responsibility, but it also removes your power. If someone else is always the reason you are angry, bitter, or afraid, then your peace depends on them changing first. That is a terrible way to live, because it hands control of your inner world to people who may never deserve it. Seneca understood this well. He warned that anger punishes the person who carries it more than the person who caused it. Think about how often that happens. Someone insults you for 30 seconds, yet you replay the conversation for 3 days. They have already moved on with their life, while your mind keeps reopening the wound. At that point, the original event is no longer the problem. Your attachment to it is. The same pattern appears in quieter ways. You see a friend's success and feel jealous. Instead of asking why their achievement bothers you, your mind searches for reasons to dismiss it. You tell yourself they were lucky, they had better opportunities, they knew the right people. Maybe some of that is true, maybe it isn't. But none of those explanations reveal why someone else's progress feels like a personal threat. That is the hidden question. Jealousy often exposes a desire you have ignored. Anger often exposes an expectation you never questioned. Fear often exposes an identity you are desperate to protect. Every uncomfortable emotion carries information, but the ego is in such a hurry to escape the discomfort that it never stops long enough to read the message. Imagine carrying a smoke detector that keeps sounding an alarm. Instead of looking for the fire, you keep removing the batteries. The silence feels like relief, but the danger remains. That is exactly what happens every time you distract yourself from an emotion instead of examining it. The feeling disappears for a while, but the cause quietly grows stronger beneath the surface. Marcus Aurelius practiced the opposite habit. He slowed the mind before he trusted it. He knew that the first reaction is often the loudest, not the wisest. When anger appeared, he did not immediately obey it. When pride appeared, he did not immediately believe it. He created space between the impulse and the action, because that small space is where freedom begins. Most people never create that space. They mistake speed for honesty. They think their first emotional reaction is their truest self. It isn't. Your first reaction is usually a mixture of habit, memory, fear, and ego. Character is revealed by what you choose after that first reaction, not by the reaction itself. This explains why willpower alone rarely solves self-sabotage. You can force yourself to behave differently for a few days, even a few weeks, but if the belief underneath never changes, your old patterns patiently wait for the next moment of stress. The stronger the pressure, the more likely you are to fall back into the familiar response. That is why people promise to stay calm, then explode under pressure. They promise to stop procrastinating, then delay the moment things become uncomfortable. They promise to trust again, then withdraw the instant they feel vulnerable. The behavior returns because the belief that created it was never challenged. The good news is that hidden beliefs lose much of their power the moment they become visible. You cannot fight an enemy you refuse to see, but once you recognize its voice, it becomes much harder for it to deceive you. That is why self-awareness is not passive. It is one of the most practical forms of strength. It allows you to catch an impulse before it becomes a decision, and a decision before it becomes a habit. This is also the point where many people give up, because looking honestly at yourself is uncomfortable. It is easier to stay distracted. It is easier to stay offended. It is easier to keep believing that everyone else is the problem. But if you have made it this far, you are already doing something most people never do. You are questioning the stories your mind has been telling you for years, and that is the first real step toward freedom. If this idea is changing the way you see yourself, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. More importantly, leave a comment with one emotional pattern you have noticed in your own life. Naming it is not a sign of weakness. It is often the moment that pattern begins to lose its grip. Because once you stop running from your hidden mind, you are finally ready to do what the Stoics believed mattered most: examine it with honesty instead of fear. The next step is learning exactly how to do that when anger, jealousy, or resentment shows up in real time. Knowing that your emotions carry a message is one thing. Catching that message while it is happening is something else. This is where the Stoics separated themselves from everyone else. They did not wait until the end of the day to regret their reactions. They trained themselves to interrupt the reaction before it became an action. That is a skill, and like every skill, it can be practiced. The exercise begins with something that sounds almost too simple to matter. It is not. The first step is to stop moving. The next time anger, jealousy, resentment, or fear appears, resist the urge to answer immediately. Don't send the message. Don't defend yourself. Don't explain. Don't try to win the argument inside your head. Your only job is to notice what is happening without feeding it. Most emotions grow because we keep supplying them with fresh thoughts. The mind gathers evidence, replays old memories, predicts future disasters, and turns one spark into a wildfire. By refusing to add more fuel, you create the space Marcus Aurelius worked so hard to protect. This pause is uncomfortable because your mind mistakes delay for danger. It tells you that if you don't react now, you'll lose control, look weak, or let someone get away with something. But look closely at your own life. How many of your biggest regrets came from waiting a few minutes before speaking? Now compare that to the number that came from speaking too quickly. The answer is usually obvious. Once the emotion has settled enough for you to observe it instead of obey it, move to the second step. Ask a question that cuts beneath the surface. Instead of asking, "Why am I angry?" ask, "What does this anger believe?" Instead of asking, "Why am I jealous?" ask, "What is this jealousy trying to protect?" This small change forces you to stop describing the emotion and start investigating the belief underneath it. Imagine someone at work receives praise while you are ignored. Jealousy appears almost instantly. Most people stop there. They either criticize the other person or criticize themselves. But if you keep digging, you may discover something far more valuable. Perhaps the real belief is, if someone else succeeds, there is less success available for me. Or maybe it is, my value depends on other people noticing me. Those beliefs, not the jealousy itself, are what have been quietly shaping your decisions. The same process works with anger. Someone interrupts you during a meeting and you immediately feel disrespected. Before reacting, ask yourself what belief gave that emotion its power. Is it really about being interrupted, or have you connected your self-worth to being heard at all times? If that hidden belief changes, the interruption may still be annoying, but it no longer has the power to dominate your mind for the rest of the day. This is why the Stoics spent so much time examining their own judgments. They understood that changing behavior without changing belief is temporary. If you only control your actions, the struggle continues beneath the surface. But when the belief changes, the emotion itself begins to lose its grip because it no longer has the same foundation to stand on. Do not expect this exercise to feel comfortable. In fact, if it feels comfortable, you're probably staying on the surface. Real self-examination has a way of exposing truths the ego has spent years hiding. You may discover that your anger is protecting insecurity. Your perfectionism is protecting fear of failure. Your constant need to be right is protecting a fear of looking insignificant. Those discoveries sting, but they also explain years of behavior that never made sense before. That is the paradox almost nobody talks about. The emotion you've been trying to eliminate may become your greatest teacher. Instead of asking how to escape it, you begin asking what it has been trying to show you all along. The moment you make that shift, your darkest emotions stop acting like prison guards and start becoming guides. But one final step determines whether this understanding becomes lasting freedom or just another interesting idea that fades by tomorrow. Understanding your hidden beliefs is not enough. They must be replaced by stronger ones, or your mind will quietly return to its old patterns. Nature hates empty space, and so does the human mind. If you remove fear without building courage, fear comes back. If you silence anger without developing patience, anger finds another excuse. Lasting change happens when you deliberately train your mind to respond from reason instead of habit. This is the third step. Once you uncover the belief beneath the emotion, challenge it as if you were examining a stranger's opinion instead of your own. Ask yourself, is this belief actually true? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Would Marcus Aurelius accept this judgment, or would he see it as another story my mind is inventing? These questions interrupt the illusion that every thought deserves your trust. The Stoics understood that the mind produces impressions automatically. Wisdom begins when you decide which impressions deserve your agreement. Suppose you discover that your anger comes from the belief, people must always treat me fairly. That sounds reasonable, until life proves otherwise. People will misunderstand you. Some will lie. Others will disappoint you without apology. If your peace depends on perfect fairness, your peace will disappear the moment reality refuses to cooperate. The Stoic response is not to approve of injustice. It is to accept that other people's choices belong to them, while your character belongs to you. Once that belief changes, your emotional life changes with it. Or perhaps your hidden belief says, if I fail, I lose my value. That belief creates fear before every challenge. It convinces you not to start the business, not to apply for the opportunity, not to speak up, because failure feels like a verdict on who you are. But the Stoics measured a person differently. They judged success by the quality of one's choices, not by the outcome. A person who acts with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control has already succeeded in the only way that truly matters. External results may take time. Character does not. This is why Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself to return to the present moment. The present is the only place where your judgment can change. You cannot rewrite yesterday's mistakes, and you cannot control tomorrow's uncertainty. But you can examine the thought appearing in your mind right now. You can refuse to let one unchecked belief become another year of unnecessary suffering. Do not expect perfection from this practice. Even the Stoics did not believe wisdom arrived overnight. Marcus Aurelius filled his private journal with reminders because he knew he would forget. Seneca admitted that progress required constant effort. Epictetus taught that philosophy was not something to admire, it was something to practice every day. They expected setbacks because they understood the human mind. Their goal was not to eliminate every irrational impulse. It was to notice those impulses sooner and surrender to them less often. That should encourage you rather than discourage you. Every time you catch yourself before reacting, you have already weakened an old pattern. Every time you question a hidden belief instead of obeying it, you have strengthened a new one. These victories are quiet. No one applauds them. No one sees them. Yet they are the moments that slowly reshape your character from the inside out. There is another mistake people make at this stage. They think this exercise is about becoming emotionally cold. It is not. A Stoic does not become less human by examining emotions. A Stoic becomes more honest. Anger is still felt. Grief is still felt. Fear still appears. The difference is that these emotions are no longer allowed to seize command. They become signals to investigate rather than orders to obey. That is what true self-mastery looks like. It is not winning every battle against your emotions. It is refusing to let your emotions decide who you become. Once you understand that, the idea of shadow work stops feeling mysterious. It becomes a daily habit of exposing lies before they become actions, questioning impulses before they become habits, and choosing reason before regret. This is where the hidden enemy begins to disappear, not because you defeated a part of yourself, but because you finally stopped allowing it to operate in the dark. And when the light stays on long enough, you begin to realize something remarkable. The greatest obstacle in your life was never your shadow itself. It was your unwillingness to face it. The final lesson is what happens after that confrontation, because seeing your shadow is only the beginning. Learning to live without being ruled by it is the real victory. The moment you begin examining your hidden beliefs, something unexpected happens. The world around you does not suddenly become easier. Difficult people remain difficult. Setbacks still arrive without warning. You still lose opportunities. You still feel disappointment. The difference is that those moments no longer decide who you become. You stop living as someone who is pushed through life by every passing emotion and start living as someone who chooses a response with intention. That is the quiet strength the Stoics spent their lives trying to build. Think back to where this journey began. You believed your greatest enemy might be another person, a difficult past, or unfair circumstances. But every step led to the same discovery. The hidden battle was taking place inside your own mind, not because your emotions were evil, but because they were operating without examination. The anger was pointing toward a belief. The jealousy was exposing an insecurity. The fear was protecting an identity you had never questioned. The shadow was never your enemy. Your ignorance of it was. This is why Marcus Aurelius constantly returned to self-examination. He knew that conquering cities meant little if he remained a stranger to himself. Every day presented another opportunity to notice an impulse before it became an action, to question a judgment before it hardened into resentment, and to replace instinct with reason. His journal was not the record of a perfect man, it was the training ground of a man who refused to stop improving. That same opportunity exists every single day in your own life. The next time someone insults you, pause before answering. The next time envy appears, follow it back to the belief that gave it life. The next time fear tells you to stay small, ask whether it is protecting your future or merely protecting your comfort. These moments seem ordinary, but they are where character is built. No audience will applaud them, no headline will celebrate them, yet they determine the person you become far more than your biggest achievements ever will. Do not expect the shadow to disappear forever. The mind does not stop producing impulses simply because you understand them. Pride will return, anger will return, fear will return. The difference is that each time they appear, you will recognize them sooner. What once controlled you will now introduce itself before it takes command. That awareness is the beginning of freedom, because an impulse loses much of its power once it has been exposed to the light of reason. This is also the challenge that never ends. It is tempting to believe that one breakthrough, one book, or one insight will permanently transform your mind. The Stoics knew better. Character is not built in one dramatic moment. It is built in thousands of ordinary decisions that nobody else notices. Every difficult conversation becomes another opportunity to practice. Every disappointment becomes another test of your judgment. Every emotional reaction becomes another invitation to know yourself more deeply than you did yesterday. If you found yourself recognizing old patterns in this video, don't let this become another idea you admire and then forget. Put the 3-step exercise into practice today. The next uncomfortable emotion you experience is not an interruption to your progress, it is your next lesson. And if you want to keep strengthening that habit, subscribe and join this community. Leave a comment telling me which emotion exposes your shadow most often: anger, jealousy, fear, resentment, or something else. Someone reading your answer may realize they are not fighting that battle alone. The Stoics believed that the greatest victory was never over another person. It was over the part of yourself that kept choosing ignorance instead of awareness, impulse instead of reason, and habit instead of wisdom. That victory is available every day, but only to those willing to face themselves without excuses. The darkest part of your mind cannot survive being seen.